fella coming in right behind me right here is responsible for transferring a lot of this to the digital quality that we have right now. And not only is he a great technician, he is also a devotee of Mr. Chad Coops, Mr. Larry Odom.
The old Gretsch out again today. What's up?
Yeah, after I played it here a few weeks ago, as one of my guitar friends over in Italy asked me about it and wanted to know a little more information about what this thing is and what I did and all that nonsense.
Okay.
So this is for my friend Paolo over in Sicily. Paolo, this is for you. I hope it helps you. Well, the story of the Gretsch, the first Gretsch. This is not the first one. This is the second one that I had way back in the 70s, 1970s. The first one I had was like this. It was a country gent, a double cutaway. I think my dad bought it for me as a high school gift after I'd really gotten into this thumb picking and chet playing. He seen that I guess it was here to stay, and I wasn't going to be giving up on it. And so he bought me my first Gretsch when I think I was 15. But the story on it was a 66 model or 67 Gretsch CG. It had the wide neck, 1 3/4 inch wide at the nut. So it was a wide neck with a flat radius. And I think everything else was the same. Besides that, the neck was wider on it. And he bought it off a local fellow around here named Bill Collins, W.R. Collins. He had it and the amp up for sale. And back then, before the internet and all that, we had this thing called the newspaper. And if you wanted to buy something, you looked in the want ads for sale, or want to buy. And so, one day, this fellow Bill Collins, he had a Gretsch and an amp for sale in there. And he lived down near Jonesboro, and he was more of a Travis player, if I remember correctly. But he was a pilot, an airplane pilot, and he was wanting to go back into training to get his multi-engine pilot license. And I guess they charge you so much an hour, for that. So he was trying to raise money to go back and get his multi-engine pilot license. And so he had his old Gretsch up for sale. And I just, I don't know if I was already or maybe I was fixing to take a job with a gospel quartet. And I didn't really have a good guitar for that, like professional work. And so here's this Gretsch in the paper, and so my dad and me went down there and he helped me buy it, my first Gretsch. And I played that thing for, 3 or 4 years, traveling with the gospel quartet and whatnot. And then one day, Dad gets a call from, I forget if it was somebody he knew or it might have been Tony Ellis or, one of the banjo people in the banjo world back then. Got a call from somebody that knew that he had a Gibson Granada, an original 5-string. Most of them were tenors or raised heads, as I've been told. And a 5-string flathead original Granada from the 20s is kind of like a rare thing in the banjo line. I don't know nothing about banjo, so don't quote me. But anyhow, he had this banjo, and Billy Keith had gotten interested in it and was trying to get him to sell it. And so I was in college by then, and I was about to get out of college. And so Dad, being Dad, he said, well, I'll sell you my Granada for X amount of dollars and a Gretsch CG with a small neck, a narrow neck up here at the nut. I was very happy with the first Gretsch, but I never did like that wide nut. My hands are not that big. And, so it was more of a hindrance to me since I had kind of small hands, having that big wide nut, 1 3/4. And so I wanted to get the skinny neck Gretsch, and so here was this golden opportunity. Dad was in one of his trading modes, and so he made a deal with Bill Keith up in Massachusetts for the banjo and a Gretsch on the trade. And so this is the Gretsch that I got in that trade with Bill Keith for Dad's banjo, and it's the narrow neck. And I got this one, I think, around 79 or 80. Well, let's see, I got out of school in 83, college. So it'd been around 82 or 83 when I got a hold of this. This is a 71 model, by the way. I don't know where that falls in the chronology. I think it's near the end of the Brooklyn Gretches, before they picked up and moved everything out to Arkansas, and the quality just went to nothing, for a while when they moved. because all their old craftsmen, most of them didn't move with the plant. They stayed in Brooklyn, you know, and I guess they just retired or did something else. But anyhow, this was toward the end of the Brooklyn, I guess, Gretsch's, right before they moved out to Arkansas. I've been told. I don't really know, you know. So I got this Gretsch and I liked it. It had the nice skinny neck, and so now I had an extra Gretsch that I didn't really need and at the time. And you know, a little later on, one of my local picking buddies here named Leon Arnett, and Leon was a friend of Elmer Harr's, which Elmer was a friend of my Uncle John, and they were all the time trading on some kind of a musical thing. That's a whole other story there with Elmer Harr and Uncle John. Elmer told Dad, and I heard this once, that he wore out 3 automobiles trying to find another Gibson Granada, an original flathead 5-string. He wore out 3 cars searching for another one. You know, after John had found that one up in West Virginia. Anyway, I don't know what that has to do with Gretsch's, but it's just a story about Elmer Harr. But anyhow, Leon was friends with Elmer and Uncle John, so I kind of knew Leon through the guitar playing, and so Leon bought my original CG with the big neck, and he had it a few years, and I didn't know this at the time until, well, a few years later, I think 86, 87, somewhere along in there. I was working at the TV station, and my buddy down there, Wayne Hicks, was on the staff. He was a staff photographer at the TV station. That's what he did. He took pictures and he ran the darkroom and did all that at the station. Well, he was a kind of a music guy. He didn't play, but he liked to listen, and he knew a lot of the older guys like Buffalo Johnson and some of those guys that nobody's ever heard of before. They're not from this area. So Wayne, he would pal around with me and shoot me with his camera, you know, when I would go out playing with Red Peterson and places like that. Wayne would tag along if he wasn't working, and he would, you know, shoot video and take photos of us playing wherever we happened to be. And if it weren't for Wayne, I wouldn't have anything from way back when, you know, and what survived just survived because Wayne, you know, was there with his camera outfit, you know, just as a hobby. So anyway, Wayne came over to the house one day. He wasn't doing nothing, and he said, "Why don't you get all your guitars out and let's take a picture of them?" And I forget what the reason was now, but we had a reason for doing it. I forget why now, but anyhow, we got all the guitars out and lined them all up, and he took pictures and all that. And he said, "Well, boy, I've got a nephew that would just love this." And he said, "You mind if I call him and invite him over?" I said, "No, I don't care." So he called his nephew, and they came over, and he had a friend with him, another young boy. These guys were like 15, 16, 17 years old, just young boys. And his friend was Billy Crawford. And so Billy, was really a good player even then. He was like 16, I think, at the time, and I could tell he was going to do some playing. And so we had a good afternoon taking pictures and looking at guitars and swapping stories, and so it went on. Years passed, and 20 years probably, or maybe more. And Billy was working up in, I think, Bristol at a music store. He'd had his, his musical life, as it was. He toured the world with a blues singer. I forget what her name was, but they went all over the world. It's a kind of a famous band, and he was a member of it. Here I am, I can't even tell you their name now. That shows you how bad I am. But anyhow, he was working at a music store, in his, I guess, his retirement. By that time, he was no longer on the road, just playing locally. So we reconnected and swapped stories again, and he had, I think the story had gone that he had married Leon's daughter, I think. And Billy, if you're watching, I hope I'm telling this right. And so he had married, I think, Leon's daughter, if I remember it right. And Leon had that guitar of mine, and Billy had gotten it from Leon because Leon had a stroke, and he was up in years, and so Billy took my old guitar, my old Gretsch, on the road when he went out traveling the world, and that guitar wound up in Australia. He traded it for something when he was touring Australia with that big blues band. And I forget what it was, the trade was now, but he traded it out for something else. And so that Gretsch wound up in Australia. I guess it's still there. And so, that's interesting, a guitar's life. You never know where one may wind up one day when it leaves your hands. That's kind of interesting. But anyway, back to this thing here. Over the years, I've done a lot of modifying to this box, and well, I think the first thing that I did was, if you'll notice, this is just the knob. There's nothing attached to the knob, and it's all tightened up. All the guts of this old foam damper, mute, I took all that stuff out. I never used it, and it rattled, and I just didn't like the thing, so I just took it all out, except for this little knob, and I left it because it's tight and doesn't rattle. And another thing that I really had a lot of problem with was this guitar originally had one of those bar bridges that, it wasn't a rocking bridge, but the bottom of the posts were rounded, and they sit in a little channel with a little wire pin, with the idea that it was supposed to move on that pin, or pins rather. There was one on each side. Well, it never did work right. The thing would, it would fall over sometimes if it got a little too far one way or the other. So I went through ordeals with that, trying to make it not do that, and it would rattle, and it never was right. So I just finally got disgusted with it and put a tune-o-matic bridge on it. And of course, when I did that, all my problems went away. I never had another one after that. And I think I changed the spring in this tremolo arm. It seemed like I had a really heavy gauge spring that had maybe like 8 turns or 7 turns, I forget now. And I got the lighter spring that had maybe 6 turns and put it in there, and that lowered this arm down, to where I could get it in position. And if you ever notice Chet, how he played, if you're going to play Chet style, he had it about right here in line with this bridge pickup, where he could just slide his hand right back here, and grab that blend, and or slide forward and play strum, and you just slide back and you're right in line there. And in order to do that, I had to lower the pick guard. If you can look here, this is, I think, considerably lower, from the top of the fretboard down to, I think I lowered it about 3/16 of an inch. It's almost on the top of the pickup trim, the little bezel. And I did that because, going back to fingers and your playing, in order to have a comfortable playing, if you're going to play, Chet style, what works for me is to be able to rest this part of my palm right here on these bass strings, where I can grab the tremolo arm, with the little finger, and have enough height here, or arch, in order to straighten the fingers out when you play. So, having this at the right height, and this at the right height, and this at the right height, all has to coincide, in order to be able to comfortably play from that position. And so that's what all this was about, was getting this stuff to the right height that I liked it in order to play my best. And Well, let's see. Sound. I read somewhere in a book, Chad had lowered his neck pickup on his CG. And I thought, well, why not? So I lowered mine down, and if you'll notice, if you can look real close here at the difference between the height of the bridge pickup and the height of the neck pickup versus the height of the fretboard or the height of the strings. There's a big difference there. And now I've compensated for that difference in height by raising the pole pieces, the screws, on the front row. And if you notice the back row here, I've screwed them all the way down. And a couple of these I had to screw up closer to the strings to get the tone balance right, the volume, string to string. And what that does by lowering this pickup and by readjusting the poles to maintain a tonal or a volume balance is this gives you a kind of a dry sound, kind of that hollow sound. And the other thing that it does by lowering it right here in this area is it gets the pickup and the little toe pieces out of the way of your pick. You know, so you can pick close and you won't hit the pickup and make a click sound. In order to do that, I had to go inside, take the pickups out, and shave a piece of wood off of each of the supports in order to lower it down, and also in order to lower the pickup down to to sit on the wood flatly. I had to take about 1/4 of an inch of metal off of the bottom end of each of the pickup covers, these little gold-plated covers, and that's what that is. Now let's see, I can get them out here so we can see it a little bit better. Some of the bits and pieces. So there's the bottoms of the ends of the pickups, which would be, you know, at the bottom of this pickup on each side. And so I sawed off about 3/16 to 1/4 of an inch off of each end of the neck pickup, and took a few little chunks of wood out of the supports, the top supports, which that's not a very major thing. I mean, they're plenty thick enough. They're like 3/4 of an inch thick, or I should say tall. They're about 1/2 an inch thick, so there's a lot of wood there. So taking a little bit out is not going to, you know, create a catastrophe. I hope. Another thing that I did on this guitar, if you look right here closely on this neck binding, I put a few little cheat notes here, few little dots, and so that says C, D, A, and that tells me when I'm doing these harmonics, you know, where the 12th fret is if I'm in A or C or D. So that gives me some reference, you know, where to put these hands to do that. Let's see, well, so that's what that is. Just a little cheat note that kind of tells me where to put these fingers to do harmonics. Now inside, I put a couple of additional support blocks inside the guitar, which we'll have to do a little bit of taking apart here to see that, which, you know, if you're unfamiliar with the old Gretsches, they had an access hole in the back, so you could get inside to the entrails, and you know, because it's a sealed top, there's no F holes, you know, cut in the top. They're just painted on. So they had to have some way to get inside to, you know, to do things other than through the pickup holes, which I suppose they could have done it through the pickup holes. I don't know why not, but seeing how this is a dead box anyway, it's not an acoustically tuned box. It doesn't really matter how many holes you cut in it. You know, it's not going to affect the sound because it was built, you know, to be an electric. Oh. Okay, so inside, have you got enough light, Don?
I think so.
Here's what I did. This is mahogany blocks.
Tilt it toward me a little. There you
All
go.
right, you got it? You
Yeah.
got enough light?
That's better.
These are mahogany blocks that I cut and shaped to fit the contour inside the top. And I had drilled holes in them. So see, that's full of holes and that one's full of holes. So we got a couple mahogany blocks in here alongside the top supports. And those are positioned right under the bridge, those two mahogany blocks. And that is reminiscent of the early 6120, you know, from the 50s, having that trestle design under the bridge. They didn't put that in these in the 60s. You know, it was just an open hole in there. And so I wanted to get more support under the bridge, you know. And so this is actually an old Dan Earlywine trick that I learned from Dan Earlywine. And if you don't know who he is, you need to look him up. He's a guitar fixer and luthier from way back, and he knows all the tricks. Now, not only did these wooden blocks give me a more solid top, for the bridge to sit on. And therefore you have less vibrations here, having more solid top. And so that's kind of my little mess here that I made out of this Gretsch, over the years. And, it came up with kind of a unique sound by doing all this, a sound that's not exactly like anybody else's, and that's what makes me happy, is I want to sound my own sound, or try to as much as possible. I know that's a very difficult thing to do nowadays because everything's been done, and it's everybody copies everybody else to a certain degree. And so trying to come up with some kind of an original sound is really kind of a difficult thing. In my case, it was accidental. I think more than planned. Diary of a Guitar Madman.